extrasensory perception, parapsychology, the psi factor. Whatever grand names it's called by, it still remains largely a matter of faith rather than established fact. And among scientists, the believers are still a tiny minority. But 100 years ago, most scientists refused to believe in hypnotism. It belonged in the music hall with mind reading and sawing a lady in half. But since then, quantum physics has stood science on its head. Neither the evidence of our senses nor the laws of cause and effect carry the weight they once did. And hypnotism can even be got on the national health, though scientists still can't explain it. So you'd think that now they'd be a little more open-minded about telepathy and premonitions and all those other elusive oddities that seem to break the rules.
In this country, there's very little organized research into the paranormal. Miles from the main roads in the middle of a forest, research is going on near Salisbury Plain. Experiments take place in this lonely cottage with telepathy, psychokinesis, that's mind over matter, and precognition, that's seeing into the future.
8, 2, 4, 7.
It seems to be possible for certain gifted people to break the laws of chance by scoring more hits than they should. But how can extrasensory perception and paranormal powers fit into our present view of science? The Paraphysical Laboratory in Wiltshire tries to find out, and we report on their progress. It's work that would have been dismissed as witchcraft 100 years ago.
Red.
Well, that was red, and she got it right. She was trying to judge the colours just by touching them with her fingers when she was blindfolded.
Yes, indeed, and in fact, she quite often scores 8 out of 10 on tests like that. But there were some more recent experiments in which it was proved that 20% of all the subjects could distinguish colour just by their fingers.
They'd say, perhaps, that they're picking up some sort of energy from the colours, which is absorbed by their fingertips, rather like the energy that water diviners seem to pick up with their hazel twigs. We investigated several kinds of dowsing or divining for this series. One film we made was about a man who finds lost objects or people with a map and a pendulum. It's a story that had a sad ending. Early in June last year, a policeman disappeared from his station in Sussex. In December, his body was found not far away. But in September, while they were still looking for him, we offered to bring a map dowser over from Ireland to see if he could help. The result was another police search, this time just outside Crowborough.
Right, gentlemen, we know that this is the field that Mr. Trench yesterday said that we might find Peter Goldsmith. The exact spot is somewhere, I would think, about 150 yards away from us in the centre of this field. What I propose we do is to search this field by going across it in a line, backwards and forwards, until we cover that spot, and then we go down to the bottom.
I don't think any of us really had much hope that we'd find Peter Goldsmith here on Marden's Hill. It seemed too near Stenning, for one thing, because it's only 50 miles away, and the Sussex police have been hunting all over the county for this man, with helicopters, divers and tracker dogs, ever since P.C. Goldsmith disappeared on June the 2nd. They had hardly anything to go on either, as I discovered when I talked to Chief Inspector Pullen.
What can you tell me, Chief Inspector, about P.C. Goldsmith?
Well, as you know, he was stationed here at Stenning, and he was last seen tea time on the Friday the 2nd of June. He left his home about 3:30 that day, and he came to the police station just after that. He was seen in Stenning village in the afternoon about 4, and just before 5 he was seen going off onto the downs alone, but that's the last we've seen of him.
We may never know exactly what happened after P.C. Goldsmith took that last walk up to the downs. Could our dowser really retrace his steps months after he went missing? It was interesting that the police were quite prepared to act on his findings. But you see, in the past, they'd been helped by clairvoyants and mediums, and sometimes they'd had uncanny success. As a map dowser, all Thomas Trench needs is the target to focus on, and the revolutions of the pendulum are supposed to tell him the rest.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. He's about here.
Later in this series, we'll be telling you the full story of that search. But our aim in this first program is to give you some idea of the wide range of people and experiences involved in ESP. It's not only the police who make use of dowsers' help. The Gas Board and British Rail make use of them too, and do commercial firms.
Last summer, Philip Biss bought a cottage in the Wye Valley. A cottage with great possibilities, but no water. He needed a well, and when he wrote for an estimate, the contractors sent a water diviner.
The property, the land within itself, actually extends from the oak trees that we passed on the way up,
Yes.
up this hedge, and to the fence behind,
Yes.
and then crosswise it goes to the yew tree there,
Yes.
and similar length on that side. It's about half an acre in all,
That's what I've got.
so that's what we've got to manage with.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Many thanks, we'll carry on.
All right, thank you.
Pat Lucas discovered the art of dowsing when an old Welshman came to her husband's farm to find a new supply of water for their hens. She began practicing for her own amusement, and when her reputation reached the director of the firm of contractors, he asked her to work for them. They're borehole specialists, and like most of their competitors, they depend entirely on dowsers for locating water. They've never known one of their own dowsers to be mistaken, but dowsers are rare, and good ones rarer.
Yes, that's a nice pool.
Oh, how did that go?
I found a nice stream on this boundary here.
Yes.
2 or 3 places down there. It's nice and strong. Now, I have had a bit of an explore down there.
Yeah.
There's 2...
When Pat had completed her measurements, she found water at 110 feet.
Okay, well...
Drilling costs over £5 a foot, so the water diviner's estimate has to be right.
Yes.
You know it better than I do.
It's a bit overgrown. Perhaps we'd better go this way.
All right, I'll
Come
follow
in
you.
with.
Was she right that time?
Well, we don't know yet. That cottage is so isolated that it would cost a lot to get the drilling gear up there for a start, and as the well itself is going to cost over £500, Philip is waiting to see whether there's any chance of the mains being brought a bit nearer before he decides.
Can't say I blame him. Well, the next dowsing story is rather a personal one. 2 years ago, I had a bad skiing accident, and it still gives me quite a lot of pain. So when I heard about Mr. Lewis, I was interested to see whether he could tell anything about it, knowing nothing about me and with no hints. Mr. Lewis is a pendulum dowser, but he specializes in diagnosis. I was quite interested because I must say I hadn't bargained for the list of ailments he produced instead.
Have a little liquid on your right lung.
I'm beginning to feel like one of those cars that goes in for an MOT test.
The left eye is causing you a little trouble. We won't worry too much about that now. Your pineal and the pituitary gland is slightly out.
Yes.
The rheumatism which you have in the shoulders, elbows, arms, small joints. That, I think, will correct itself between that and tummy juices. You also have an hiatus hernia.
I have a what?
An hiatus hernia, which is only a small one, and I think you just as well live with it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly know nothing about that, but obviously I will check that one out.
I got your blood pressure is a little low. Your pancreas is not working to full capacity. Your liver is certainly out.
What do you mean by out?
Not working 100% efficient. Your left-hand kidney is also a little out of condition. You've got trouble at the shoulder, back of the shoulders. That is probably caused by the clavicle, which I think has been broken at some time or another, even probably when a child.
Well, I'll certainly check. As I've told you, as far as I know, I have nothing wrong with my shoulders.
And you are also anemic.
Well,
I don't think I'd better go on with any more.
Well, you look remarkably fit, considering that daunting list of ailments. Are any of those things actually wrong with you?
I hope not, but by the time we come to our program on dowsing, I hope I'll know, because I'm having a very thorough check-up by my doctor.
In that same program, we'll be reporting on a dowser's picnic. This was an experiment to see if a group of dowsers could find two cavers hidden 200 feet down in the caves beneath the Mendip Hills. Mr. Lewis was there too, and Pat Lucas, and 3 other dowsers. Most of them were more used to finding water than they were to finding people, so it was quite a tough assignment. On the surface, the dowsers were walking a field with their pendulums and divining rods, trying to pick up the position of the cavers down below. By any known laws of science, this should have proved impossible. The cavers took radio equipment with them, so that later on their actual whereabouts could be checked with the dowsers' findings. 200 feet of limestone presented a very solid obstacle, even to the psychic radiations.
I think the bodies are somewhere here, Gordon.
You're getting quite a strong reaction in this spot, are you?
In this spot.
Dowsers have a lot of different theories about how they get their results. Some of them believe it's simply a physical phenomenon. It just seems mysterious because we can't explain it, just as electricity must have seemed mysterious 200 years ago. But others say it's some kind of a psychic force. But it's rather difficult to get them to explain exactly what they mean by that.
We'd be very interested in hearing from anyone who has views on the subject, either for or against. And we'd be interested too in hearing from people who believe they have psychic gifts, because we're planning to end the series with a program in the studio in which we'll be conducting some experiments. So if you'd like to take part, please let us know.
A lot of people, of course, are interested in psychic phenomena without claiming to have psychic gifts themselves. And there are ways in which it could be very useful to have a reliable forecast of the future.
The most widely read column in the national press isn't the editorial, or the weather forecast, or even the sports results. It's the few column inches of the daily horoscope. Last year, new magazines devoted to luck, fate and future were launched on the psychic boom. The occult has become fashionable. The fashion business itself combines crystal gazing with hard business, and certainly the designer Lee Bender finds reassurance in the occult.
I'm interested in spiritualism, in astrology, in palmistry, tea leaves, anything.
How did you become interested in the first place?
Well, it was a very strange occurrence. I was sharing a flat with a friend of mine long before I was married. And,
Well, they claimed the flat was haunted by a grumpy spirit that shouted through the letterbox. He was put to rest when a spiritualist, a medium, was called in. But Lee was so impressed by her that she's kept in touch with her since.
She was marvellous. She gave me really something to believe in. It was almost like going to see a psychiatrist or a priest, if you like.
Did you ever see anything that you just couldn't explain in any of the places that you've been or the things you've been to see that couldn't be explained away as kind of phony?
Not really. She once told me that I was part of a very old family in Italy, and that if I went to a certain place I would find names and things engraved on the stone. She'd never in fact been to Italy.
Did you go?
I did go, and I did find it. But she'd never, I did check on the fact, she'd never in fact been herself.
Did she ever tell you how she knew things like that?
She said that she listened to my guide, because everybody has a guide. In fact, they have several guides, and she used to be able to speak to them because she considered herself like a radio transmitter, and she could hear them, whereas perhaps we couldn't. And she'd speak to them, and she even spoke to me in Italian, and she doesn't know any, which is incredible, because she managed to get my guide through her.
Did she just give you confidence, or did she actually forecast things that were happening?
She gave me confidence, but she also forecast what was going to happen, strangely enough, in my fashion job, which was a very strange thing for a lady of about 70 who lived in a suburb in London who wouldn't have a clue about that.
Did she ever tell you anything specific, or did she just kind of vaguely go on a bit?
Well, she used to tell me all sorts of things about fashion, literally kind of every season. She forecast Edwardian looks. She forecast that men would become more feminine and women would become more masculine, which is exactly what's happened. She forecast feather boas and new lengths and flared skirts and all sorts of things. It was absolutely unbelievable.
Did you need this 70-year-old lady?
Gordon and I consulted a whole series of astrologers and palmists and clairvoyants last summer, and we've been waiting anxiously ever since to see how it was going to come out. Personally, all I wanted to know was what was going to happen to me in everyday life, but we'll be reporting on that later in the series. However, we found one group who have a quite different aim towards the subject.
During the 1960s, the rejection of material values sent some young people searching for a new religion, and many old beliefs and cults have been reborn. Diane Erdos lives in a Somerset field near Glastonbury, the New Jerusalem of the age of Aquarius. She has a distinct role in her society, astrologer. A friend's baby has had a chart drawn up, and his horoscope is being explained. Perhaps Quinn's parents will benefit from Diane's interpretations, but she won't tell them when to back horses, sell shares, or profit from the zodiac. She uses astrology for less material reasons, to explain the subtleties of human relationships.
Will apply to him too. So the moment that he's born, the vibrations from the planets and the placings of them will be an influence on him from the moment on that 1 second that he's born. He will represent that second in time. He will be a picture of that second in time. He was born with the sun in Cancer. So he might not appear to be an energetic person. As far as his sun is concerned, he's got a lot of energy elsewhere. He's got loads of Mars and fire streaking about, mainly fire signs, in his chart. You took him to the sea the other day, and he was really upset that night and the next day. And he's got his Neptune.
Diane believes the importance of astrology as a religious one. All religion, she feels, stems from man's first look at the stars, and every person and everything that's born is a holy thing because it matches the stars. To Diane, that's what astrology is about, the science of the stars as it relates to people on this planet.
And because it rules the breasts, and to the stomach, which is the only part of him that he's really conscious of most of the time. So he's going to really be into feeding and into food and into all the comforts of the mother. Very much so.
That's cool.
Some people believe that psychic gifts are just that, gifts as rare and inexplicable as perfect pitch. But unlike perfect pitch, they can't be relied on. They can't be produced to order. Although some people claim that if you do have such a gift, you can develop it by practice, providing you have the right equipment. And you can't buy psychic equipment at the ironmonger's.
Archer's Court, the home of the Society of Metaphysicians, lies beyond the cemetery, high above the sea, at Hastings. John Williamson leads a team researching the paranormal. Astral projection, out-of-the-body experiences, dowsing, clairvoyance, communicating with the dead, and exploring the human aura. They investigate the lot. Much of their time, though, is spent making or importing equipment for psychical research. These boxes labelled aura goggles, Mr. Williamson. What's in them?
Well, these comprise a standard pair of goggles fitted with a dark filter which passes near ultraviolet and near infrared.
Let's have a look through them. All I can see is everything purple. What am I supposed to see with them?
This will enable you to see the radiation around the human body, which is a pale grey-blue tobacco smoke-like emanation.
Or what about a crystal ball?
The idea that you look into it and you see a cloud forming and pretty pictures come out is wrong. You sense yourself to be a part of it, and of course the cloudiness and the emergence of pictures really occurs in your mind with the crystal as an aid to concentration. Going from the crystals, we could enter into the field of automatic writing, which would involve us in the use of the Ouija planchette. It can be used in two ways. One is to cut out a number of letters and put around a table, and two or more people sit with their fingertips on the board, which then moves and runs to the letters, spelling out messages and, well, possible secrets of the sitters as well.
What about this trumpet? This is a spirit trumpet.
Well, this is an instrument of hope, in the sense that you hope it's going to move. It really needs a physical medium in a seance and an awful amount of dedication to developing psychic ability. I've seen trumpets like this floating around in a circle, so I'm quite sure that psychokinetic effects are very real and these devices can move. Their purpose, of course, is to enable spirit voices to be amplified in the seance room, and the luminous bands at the end enable you to find the thing in the dark.
All right then, Gordon, what did you bring back from Hastings?
Well, among other things, this aura meter, which you're supposed to hold like that, and the little metal thing at the end waves about according to the aura from the object or the person you're pointing it at. Then there's this pendulum called a Pasquini pendulum, a horizontal pendulum. That's for finding, among other things, objects in the earth. It's got a little hollow in the inside there, and you can put a capsule of water or oil or whatever you're looking for inside there. It's called a witness, and then you hold the pendulum like that. The same with this pendulum here. That's also got a hollow in which you can put something inside.
I'll tell you what worries me about all this. I know, for example, that some mediums don't take money for their services. Once I see things packaged like this and sold as a business, it smacks to me of exploitation. How did you feel when you came back from Hastings?
Well, it's certainly a commercial operation in the sense these things cost about £1, some of them a good deal more than that. But it is supplying a demand because they do a lot of exports, in fact, quite an export trade in crystal balls to the USA, for instance. I don't know, it seems to me if it is really something to do with communication with the next world, then that's a really very exciting thing. And for the spirits to communicate by flinging trumpets about is rather trivial.
I rather agree. We have here a magnificent silver trumpet, but we didn't find a medium who could guarantee to float the silver trumpet around the room in front of our cameras. We did, however, find a medium who agreed to let us make a film about her and to discuss her experiences with a psychiatrist.
How did it start? What was the first thing you noticed out of the ordinary?
Well, I can go back to when I was a child.
Was that the first?
That's the first I can remember.
What was that?
And I was in bed. I wasn't very old. I might have been about 5, you know. And it was in the days when they had candles, you know, penny candles. Well, they had one at the side of the bed. I used to sleep in Mother's bed, so I couldn't have been very old. I might have been 4. And anyhow, I can remember waking up, and I think the curtains had caught on fire. I'm not sure about this, because it's too long ago. Some of it is what they've reminded me of over the years. But I can remember, and I can see him now in my thoughts. See, this is it. Some of it is in your thoughts. It was a policeman at the end of the bed, and he had a moustache. And, well, I can see him now, then, to be quite honest, in my thoughts.
And this was something you saw?
That was the first. Yeah, and then I saw my mum and dad walk right through him.
And then at 19, what happened?
At 19, you know, the war broke out. And me and my friend, we were very interested in going to all different churches. Well, then I had an auntie that went to a spiritualist church. Prior to this, my mother went to a spiritualist church and took me as a child. You see?
Yes.
But I can't remember anything about that. Doreen, that was my friend, she asked me if, you know, she said, oh, do you think your Aunt Mabel would take us to a spiritualist church? I said, well, it'd be a laugh, if nothing else. And we goes along.
And what happened to you then?
Well, I can remember going to the church, and I saw an elderly gentleman. He was sat in a seat, you know, like they used to have rows of the old-fashioned like forms with backs on, you know, to rest your back. And he was sat down there, and this lady went and sat right on his lap. And I said to Doreen, oh my God, look. She said, I can't see nothing. I said, well, I can.
Elsie's role in her community is rather like the role of the medieval wise woman who could be found once in every medieval European village. And even now, in some cultures, it's recognized that shamans and sorcerers have inexplicable powers. Now, it could be that these powers work best in primitive societies, but perhaps they're really latent in us all, and those premonitions and odd coincidences are just the tip of the iceberg, and underneath there's an enormous amount going on that we can only guess at.
If that's true, and ESP does exist, we're going to have to change a lot of our ideas about the world we live in and about ourselves. We can't hope to bring you proof either way. We can't even hope to cover the whole field, but our subjects will range from communication with the next world to telepathy and woodlice. And we hope that range may be extended by some of your letters.
Do please write to us at Leap in the Dark, BBC, White Ladies Road, Bristol, BS8 2LR. It's been foretold that we'll be back in a month's time with a programme about the prediction business. We're waiting a month to give us a chance to read all your letters. We hope you'll be with us then. Goodbye.